And here we go.
Yak Gadget, made in America, based outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Yak Gadget offers all kinds of storage accessories, quick mount motor mounts, anchor systems, track mounted accessories, even paddles. Go to yakgadget.com and get your kayak decked out for your next trip out on the water.
The 153 Bait Company, based in Troy, Ohio, make everything from plastics to custom painted hard baits. Hook 'em hard and hook 'em often. All of our baits are made to order, and all of our hard baits are hand painted to order. So go to the153anglers.com to place your order today.
This segment is brought to you by Jig Masters. Step up your game with high-quality performance jigs, spinner baits, buzz baits, and more from jigmasters.com. And always, when in doubt, get the jig out.
You're listening to Bass Fishing for Noobs on the Paddle and Fin podcast with your hosts Ryan Milford and Sean Laughery.
Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs on the Paddle and Fin podcast. I am your host, Sean. Ryan is still working things out with his work schedule and everything. He should be back next week. Anxiously awaiting his return, but for now, still flying solo. So tonight, making a return appearance to Paddle and Fin, but for the first time ever on the Bass Fishing for Noobs segment, I'd like to welcome Mr. Richy Laughery. Welcome, sir.
Howdy. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for hopping on. I'm looking forward to talking about some swim baits and stuff. But for those of the listeners who haven't heard you on Paddle and Fin before, I know you've been on the OG show a few times, kind of just popping in here and there. But for those of the listeners who haven't heard or aren't familiar with you, can you just let the folks know who you are, where you're from, kind of how you got into fishing, and we'll go from there.
Well, same old story. Dad was into fishing, and I mean, I've been into it since I was 3-4 years old, and that was 32 years ago. And I'm based out of Southwest Missouri, Branson. I'd say Hollister, but people think California. But I've got Table Rock, I've got Bull Shoals within 15-minute drive either way from my house.
Wow.
I've got Taneycomo at my front door, which it's advertised as a trout lake. But it's got everything in it. Got a lot of predatory species around here. Striped bass, all three black bass, walleye. There's a lake just north of here that has muskie in it. And then, like I said, Taneycomo is known for trout. It was a year and a half ago. We had 2 state records caught 2 months apart. It was 39 and 40 pounds.
Wow.
For a brown trout.
That's kind of crazy. I don't think I ever thought of Missouri as a fishing paradise, but it sounds pretty awesome, man.
Our state record striper was caught out of the same area. I catch mine, and it's 4 pounds off the world freshwater record.
Okay.
65 pounds, and the record's 69.10.
What's your weather out there right now? Like, are you still cold, or are you warming up?
Full blown spring. We're seeing lows like 30s, 40s, and highs in the 60s and 70s.
Okay, so it sounds just like I'm in PA, and it sounds very similar to where we're at too. So that's cool. So
trees have bloomed and flowers are popping, and
so everything's really starting to heat up, I imagine, right? Or fishing wise, anyway. Cool.
So I went out 2 weeks ago with a buddy who was competing in a tournament on that lake. He had 2 over 6 in 4 casts. I had 2 5s, a 4, a couple of 3-pounders, and he had several others. And we had fast and furious action for 40 minutes, and I racked up 100.25 inches with my best 5.
That's amazing. Those are the kind of days you just love.
I didn't even pull up my stakeout pole anchor for 1 hour.
Oh my gosh. You're gonna, get all your luck out in the first shot,
Yeah, that was the good first fishing trip of the year. I'd gone out on Bull Shoals in 2 different areas, and one area had an extreme amount of shad schools. I was marking bait schools 30 feet wide, 30 feet deep, and 40 foot of water. And,
oh my goodness.
And then the other area the next week was just gin clear, and you really had to be stealth to even get anywhere near sight of a fish.
Okay.
But yeah, that was the 2 weeks ago was the first good one. I went this morning. I almost threw my old reliable bait, but I had picked up the Dream Smasher. It's almost 8 inches. It's measured at 7 3/4 inches, the Flying V, and I swear this thing's 2 inches wide. It's an extremely girthy bait. I went 0 for 3 on hits, and I'm pretty sure it spooked the whole area.
Okay.
I sat there for an hour with no other bites with other baits and moved on, and an old standby other than the swim baits for me is the jig. This time, what was it, the 24th? So 3 days ago was the 1 year anniversary. I went out the same area and caught 2 largemouth over 9 pounds.
Wow.
And the second one was on a jig, and I went back to that same area, and I had 88.5 inches and managed to catch a 19 1/4 that it called my 19 in my monthly. So I gained a quarter.
Nice. Usually when you're up that big, it's, you're fighting it for anything, but that's definitely an upgrade. So
last year, the day I caught the 2 9s, I racked up 100.5, and I went out 2 days later and culled my bottom 3. So I had a 23 3/4, a 23, a 22.5, a 20 3/4, and like a 19 3/4, and I ran out of time. It was like the last day of the month.
Oh my goodness!
I finished out at 109 3/4.
That's crazy. That's insane.
And
and you
swim bait buddy.
You won that tournament, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah, I won that and big bass. 23, anything over 23 inches is going to be extremely hard to beat in Missouri. Fun fact about catch and release in our CPR tournaments. So that big bass that I caught for March, it was caught again by my painter buddy that I mentioned in July. It was caught again 3 months later, and again it won him the big bass pot. So we've roughly located that fish's address and sent it a 1099. $800.
That's the least you can do, really. Yeah. Maybe buy him some dinner.
Also in July, another buddy, Brennan, he spent 20-something plus days that month on the water and finally edged me out at 110.5.
Oh my goodness. That's just crazy. I can't even imagine.
Strictly swim bait.
Wow. Well, let's talk about that. So we're going to talk about swim baits tonight. I guess we'll start with your favorites. How'd you get started throwing swim baits? Is that something you've always done, or how long ago did you start throwing them?
So in the late 90s, the Castaic hardhead, I think it's the hardhead, shad and bluegill. I bought them because they look realistic. I really didn't have the proper gear to throw them with. I don't even know or remember if I ever caught a fish on them. One time I was digging through Dad's tackle box, found this broomstick, that he had carved in the late 80s for pike when we lived in Iowa. Threw that in the neighborhood pond, caught a 4-pound largemouth and a 4-pound smallmouth, just waking it on the surface. Weird thing, I never threw it again.
Huh.
That was 2001. That was 2001. I lived in California for a little bit. Found a Spro, the BBZ 4-inch shad on the bank. It was a floater. Put a new hook on it. Fish blasted it left and right. Having some familiarity with Castaic, the bait shop there at that lake in California, they had the 6-inch Castaic hardhead. Bought it, walked down to the boat ramp, gave it a toss, flung the body off the head, and walked right back up to the bait shop and got a return. So moved back in Missouri in 2010. It was 2012 or 13. Bass Crazy 365 was holding a power versus paddle tournament, CPR tournament, bass boats versus kayaks.
That's awesome.
It was a week-long tournament. I had a hot bite with a spinnerbait. Got a good almost 80-inch limit the first day. Fished every day for that next week and could not for the life of me cull my 14-inchers that were my limit. And, I was over on Bull Shoals and stopped in a bait shop over there, and they had this Strike King Kong wake bait, 6-inch. Yeah, this is the gizzard shad color. It's an out of production bait. Paid $25 for it. At the time, for me, gosh, we're almost 10 years now. That was expensive. They don't like rocks. So if you like doing an underhand cast, these are not for you. I floated probably 3 of these baits with underhand casts. And I actually found a piece of one in one of my regular areas last fall after it'd been there for 3-4 years since the last time I went down there. And it was just that little tail section with the treble on it.
Nice.
And then, so for the first 2 months I owned that wake bait, I used to crank it down, try to jerk it, and I started watching some videos on YouTube, Tactical Bassin, and Bill C. Mattel had pumped out a bunch of videos in their 2010, 11, 12, and they all rang the same bells, like slow down. So October 2013, yeah, so that had to have been 13. I was waiting on a buddy to fish Table Rock, went over to this dam area, bridge area, threw that wake bait out, and you just creep it just enough to get it to wiggle. And first cast, I hadn't even fished that bait in Table Rock yet. And first trip with that bait, I had a 5 1/4 pound smallmouth absolutely explode on it. Not even 5 foot from where it landed. I almost forgot to set the hook. The strike was so spectacular. Like I'd wish I'd had that $100,000 camera that could just go and zoom up on that in slow mo. Like you saw the fish come up, chomp it, and then it like flipped, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Better set that hook. I finally met up with my buddy on a boat, went out, and I think I caught 2 or 3 more on that bait. So I was like, all right, there's something to it. And I started picking up the Spros. That's the 6-inch Spro BBZ Junior. They're $20 on Tackle Warehouse.
Okay.
The floater's 2 ounces. The slow sink is 2 1/4. And they have a fast sink that's 2 1/2. So that was another learning curve. Was the sink rates. The sink rates, I got a kiddie table right here in front. My tack box on it. Which sink rate you choose depends on depth versus your retrieve speed. If you're fishing slow, most of the time a floater or the slow sink will work. If you're fishing fast, you more likely don't want the floater because it tends to blow out because it's so buoyant. So you get the slow sink, rod up a little bit, and on that fast retrieve, that bait will be right on the surface. And then you can fish a fast sink faster, deeper than you could a slow sink.
Okay.
On like glide baits, some of them have set sink rates. Some of them are floaters. Some are super tuned. Super tuned could be a floater, but the nose sits nose down so that when you start to retrieve, it'll actually dive. But when on the pause, it'll come back and float to the surface.
Okay.
Me personally, I kind of like the super tunes or floaters because you can always change out the hardware or add weight. I just emptied a box of Storm suspend strips today, wrapping a hook shank. We'll get to that. But that's let me see. Yeah, I got one here. So on this KGB Legend, there's your Storm suspend strip. If I take that strip off, and yeah, it'll be a floater. This one, it falls about that fast. I do it that slow, especially in the colder months, because once I hear guys throwing jerk baits in the area, I go straight to these, just because I can tune that and almost have a suspending glide.
Right.
Colder months fish slower. Summer months fish faster.
And how about in the water column? Is it usually the warmer the water, the higher in the water column, or it depends?
So I've caught fish in a foot of water in 50-degree even water temp.
Okay.
I've had topwater fish on that wake in January on table.
Wow.
Just to slow down. And I mean, I'm not talking about the one trip and I caught one fish. It was any sunny afternoon I had, and it was a little warmer than average.
Mm-hmm.
You go out, you find the sun-beaten banks, especially like around here, you have a lot of bluff banks. There's real steep drop off. There's quick deep water access. And you just throw this thing parallel 45 away from those banks. And I've had them eat it on the bank. And there's, I mean, icicles on the bank. That's how cold it is. And they're eating it on top in a foot of water.
Right.
But I'm fishing slow. I'm fishing 5.2 to 1, 6.4 to 1 reels. Some guys are like, you can fish a 7-1, 8.3, and you can always slow down. You know how irritating and nerve-wracking it is to slow down an 8.3 to the same crawl of a 5.2?
It's a big difference. It doesn't. You don't think it is, but
no. Oh, you can always slow down. No, it's so bad. You'll freeze before you make a full rotation. No. So, late January, pretty much the month of February is just my worst for anything. I've tried for 10 years since I've been back here to get a bass pattern going in that time that I think I'm going to just finally give up this year. And next year, same time period, I'm going to go hunt for the walleye. There's a local guide that has a jerkbait pattern when the lake level's right, aka not 30 feet high on both shoulders. That his personal best went 16 pounds.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's a big one.
One year I think he caught over 100 over 5 pounds. I think 15 of them was over 10.
Wow.
So I want to get out there with the swimbaits because our state record's set pretty high at 21 pounds 1 ounce, with the world record being 23, 24.
Not that far away.
No,
That's crazy.
So that's another thing. I haven't found much of a differentiation between species on preferences.
Okay.
I see guys on the forums always asking, "Hey, what's the best swim bait for smallmouth? What's the best swim bait for spotted bass?" They all, if you already have largemouth in that same area and you're already catching the largemouth, you're gonna catch the smallmouth and you're gonna catch the spots. I've caught spotted bass on 10-inch baits. I've caught smallies on 9-inch baits on table rock.
Okay.
They'll eat it if they can. I mean, most of the time they swipe it and they get a treble hook on a glide or something. I've not thrown a lot of the big plastics on table rock or bull shoals to target the smallmouth. I mean, the 8-inch plus stuff, I've caught them on the 6-inch mag graphs and the Scots burrows, paddle tails. But you don't have to. It's universal. I've caught I've got my striper spot. I've caught largemouth. I've caught smallmouth. I've caught spots. I've caught the walleye. I've caught the striper, all in the same baits.
It's kind of nice because you never know what you're going to pull up at that point. You're kind of
And there's massive drum down there. I haven't caught one of those on a swim bait. A couple of years ago, there is a wing wall down there at this dam. I was casting an 8-inch Spro BBZ, and I hooked and landed 5 carp. They were all 7 to 10 pounds. I mean, hooked in the face. I don't know if it was just coincidence that they were facing upstream and the lure came and got them in the face, or I don't. After the 5th fish, I just left the spot.
I was going to say, I think maybe once or twice it might be a coincidence, but after the 5th one, probably not so much.
I'm looking for white. I'm not looking for gold. I'm looking for tuxedo.
Right. Absolutely.
I've caught a 50-pound 4-ounce striper. That's my overall personal best. My kayak personal best is a 36-pounder. Both were on the same bait, the 8-inch Spro. They're $35. I throw it. I'm not even sure if the rod's available. It's a TFO 711 GTS Magnum Heavy their swim bait rod. It's their 1 to 6 ounce rod. I've been checking the website for months because guys will ask me, and every time I go check the website, it's out of stock. Now, I don't know if that's just because of COVID and because everyone else is struggling to get supplies in stock. But so I've been working on getting some other companies' rods to be able to confidently give recommendations. Like with iRod or Dobbins, I've handled them. I've casted them, but I've not used them personally for an extensive amount of time and caught fish on them and used different baits. Because the way they label theirs, like you've got the 795, It's a 7-foot, 9-inch, 5-power. There's an 806. There's an 807. There's so many. A lot of stuff's on Tackle Warehouse, and Tackle Warehouse has all the reviews on those rods, so guys will tell you if they're good or bad. Cashin came out with one. Kistler come out with their swim bait rods last year. I actually gave Trey some input on those rods. But I don't have one personally. He sent me a video of him casting. Oh, I can't remember if it was an 8-inch Huddleston or like a depth slide swimmer 250. It was a 5-6 ounce bait, and it was funny. I was watching a video and something was just irking me, and he come back with me. He's like, "So how did that cast look?" I go, "That's what's bugging me." I'm like, "Man, the way you whip that back and then chuck it forward, that's a really good way to get that line looped around the rod tip. And when you go forward, you snap that lure off." When you cast it, I mean, it could be a 1 ounce bait, it could be a 10 ounce bait. Most of the time, you want to start back here. You don't want to start up here and do a Happy Gilmore. Especially if you go and use braid. There's a lot of guys that will use braid the leader, straight braid. I don't like it. Just my style of fishing and my current rod setup is not cohesive with braid. The Taneycomo tournament I fished last year so I won March with fish off Taneycomo. We had a regular club tournament in June on it. So I've got everything rigged with swim baits, including a braid rod that I was going to throw a frog on later in the day. And I had this. This is the True Bass 5.5, and I had that tied on that braid rod. Well, I had caught another, 22.25-inch fish on that bait in April, and didn't get bit on my 6-inch mag draft. So I picked that up on my straight braid rod, hooked into a fish, got it next up to the boat. I'm grabbing my net, and this fish goes tail walking. Well, braid, no stretch. It unloaded the whole rod line, and it went to tail walking, and that easy 21-inch fish. I think a 19.25 took home big bass prize. So I don't personally care for braid. Plus, where I was getting out casting with the whole whipping, you could send your reel into a frenzy and you bird nest it with braid, that'll shock load and it'll snap.
Okay.
Whereas like a co-poly or a mono got that little stretch and a little more forgiving. So line, rod, reel setups are similar to conventional, whereas for jigs, you want a stiff rod, you want thick line, you want to maybe a little fat. Well, it depends. If you're fishing wintertime, you want slow. If you're fishing summer, you want a little faster. Crankbaits, you want a nice parabolic rod. Treble hook baits in mono. That's how I do it. I don't lose a lot of fish in the right conditions with familiar baits. Today, that flying bee, that was a new bait to me. That was the first time I was set up to throw it and get bit. It takes a 12-aught beast hook, and I could not for the life of me sitting there in the kayak with a pair of Spro split ring pliers, get that hook point bent up like that. Wasn't happening. I was looking for the bison like I come along to try and get that thing to go with this.
Right.
But with familiar baits, I don't lose a lot of fish with fishing or a co-poly like So I've been playing around with lines for years. I've used a trilene big game, 15, 20, 25 pound test. Last year I played with Maxima Ultra Green, the 18 and 25. I was throwing the 8-inch mag draft on the 18 and had rigged weedless, and had zero issues throwing out that 12 or 11 BMC. That's what I caught my 23 incher on. It weighed 9.5 pounds. Have a good scale when you catch fish. I had a crappy spring scale. It's just for me personally. It's not a freaking record. I don't need to fight nobody about it. I had a 22 3/4 that weighed 810 on a digital and a Boca grip 5 years ago, and it was about the same size fish, but a little girthier in the tail and stuff. And it just on that spring scale, it went between the 9 and the 10. I'm like 9.5. I'm good.
Yep.
So lines, keep it simple. You don't need to go out and buy a $30 spool of super extravagant fluorocarbon. If you're comfortable with fluorocarbon, whatever, Red Label, any other manufacturer of fluoro, just bump up in size. I use 20-pound big game a lot. You can probably get away with a 25 pound fluoro because it will most likely be thinner than that 20-pound mono. And it's not going to hurt you to go a little overboard with the strength. We're talking big rods, big hooks, and hopefully big fish. I've caught dinks. I had a 16.5 on that 8-inch mag draft last year. Pretty sure it was a stunted growth fish. It had the head of a 20-incher. I mean, 2-liter bottle down the throat, but it measured 16.5. It was like the middle section of this fish forgot to grow out.
Interesting.
I've had 15 inchers eat the River to Sea S-Waver 200 on Table Rock.
Okay.
That's do I have one hand?
I was going to say I have the 168. That I don't have too many, but the 168 is one size I have of the S-Waver. So
the 168 was my first glide bait in 2000. It was shortly. I think I bought it in winter of 13-14, and threw it on a 7-foot medium heavy ugly stick. I mean, this is before I got into good quality rods too. With a Walmart Abu Garcia CS 5500. Don't recommend that reel. The drag. It catches. It locks up. I lost a big striper because of that.
Okay.
There's a lot of decent aluminum framed reels on the market now that will hold plenty of 15, 17 pound mono co-poly for the under 2 ounce stuff. So yeah, I was throwing that S-Waver on an ugly stick, and I caught a crap ton of fish with it. I cashed $1,000 check on Table Rock during a KVD Classic Big Bass tournament. What else? My buddy Kevin, KGB Swimbaits, the next year he saw how many fish I'd caught. I think I cashed 2 or 3 checks in that next year's tournament. But we fished 2 days, and he went home overnight, crafted himself something similar to an S-Waver, fished the paint off of that the next day, and he finally landed a fish in the last hour. This fish smoked this bait with 3 feet a line left out of the rod. He was about to pull it out of the water, and this fish smoked it so close to the boat, and flipped it in. It was like a 4 3/4, and we ran it in, and he won that hour. So the S-Waver's fun. I don't fish it with the stock hooks. They're pretty gnarly. They're 3X strong hooks. They are very overkill.
Okay.
I mean, if you're fishing straight braid, have at it. But I swap them out. I'm playing with the sink rate. Going back to the sink rate, I played with the Gamakatsu 2X round bend short shanks, the Gamakatsu bronze, which are, I don't know, a pair of them might be a grain lighter. We're talking very small amount of weight, but it gets it to sink slower.
Okay.
And then sometimes you take those 3X hooks off, put a shorter shank 2X hook on it, and now it's a floater. So that's where we go back to the Storm suspend strips. You just slap the suspend strip on the belly, throw it in the water, and see what it does. If it still floats or it doesn't sink fast enough, you add another strip. If you've gotten so far now it sinks too fast, I start cutting strips in quarters or halves.
Okay.
To get it right where I want it. And that's with any of the glides.
You can really fine tune them.
Oh yeah. Like. Yeah. But then some of them, like this KGB Rip Shad that come out this year, they're just made to be fish fast. It's streamlined compared to his regular Chad with the width and the body. Is belly, a bunch of it on the belly's been shaved off, so it's been really streamlined to just cut, and pause. You cut, pause. And most of the time they'll hit it on the pause or ride it, kind of like jerkbait fishing. They'll either hit it on the pause or ride as you rip it. But there's a lot of crossover from conventional to swim baits. Like I've mentioned, whenever I hear guys throwing jerk baits, I throw a glide. Whenever I hear guys start catching them on spinner baits, that's where I start picking up the mag draft or just any paddle tail, larger paddle tail, because that's the way I fish them. Whether on a plain beast hook, let me see if I've got one handy.
We've heard tackle or tactical bassin mention that beast hook a lot.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I must have them all tied on. Here's a boom boom with just that's actually a 11-aught Mustad. I found them. It was like a 10-pack for 10 or $8 or $10 at the Bass Pro catalog store.
Okay.
I picked probably 2 or 3 packs of them. They're a good fit in that 8-inch mag draft. It's what I used for years before BMC come out with this with that heavy duty willow blade.
Okay.
Just because it fits the bait pretty well. The beast hooks. I mean, there's a flashy swimmer. This is the Dream Smasher 6-inch. That beast hook has a lot of drop to it. And it's nothing bad. But
well, it looks like on that bait you definitely need it because that's a pretty tall bait.
So yeah, this is the baby brother to the one I threw this morning. There's same length bait. So you can imagine this difference between an 8 and 6 inch mag draft, imagine the 8 inch version of this thing.
Right.
It almost feels that fine. But I do. So I was throwing that on Kevin had a bunch of rods made up years ago, and this is his 2 to 8 ounce rod. It's probably 5 years old now. I don't know if you know, but if you use a rod long enough, it'll break in.
Okay.
Yeah, they sometimes become limber than what they started out with.
Interesting. I don't think I ever knew that, but I haven't really had rods long enough, I think, to notice that.
Let me get a drink real quick. I'm getting a little dry throat.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Oh. But I was throwing that Flying V on that. It weighs 4.5 ounces. So, I mean, it was right in the weight range. But I was folding that rod in half like an ugly commercial, trying to set the hook on them. I have another rod from him that's 8 to 14 ounce rated.
Wow.
Actually the same blank, but double wrapped, and it made it double the stiffness. So I'm probably going to start throwing it on that just for the hook setting power. Just for the premise that I don't like braid. I don't want to have to re-spool a rod or reel the 65, 80 pound braid for one single bait when I have no issues setting hooks on other plastics.
Right.
But yeah, you don't have to go all out. I mean, I'm trying to keep on track here.
No, you're doing fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely interesting because I don't have a good rod yet. Like I would be the guy throwing the medium heavy ugly stick at this point because it's the only rod I have that I know won't break when I cast.
Yeah.
I still have a big old ugly stick that I use when I used to, catfish on the river, and it's probably the only rod I'd feel safe throwing these guys on because I really don't have that many upper end heavy rods yet. So I'm still building my arsenal. So I like hearing that.
A lot of guys balk at $120, $175, $200 plus for a swim bait rod. I can tell you the difference between, say, the Bass Pro has a musky power. I want to say it was a 7.9. I found one of those in the catalog store this last weekend, picked it up, and it weighs a ton. It is a heavy rod. It probably weighs more than my 8 to 14 ounce rated combo with a Lewis 300 Super Duty.
Wow.
I mean, with whatever reel you put on it, but it probably weighs more than that. I can throw almost 3 times as much weight as that one can. I mean, that's what you're paying for is not only the better components that the rod's made out of, but the lightweight of the whole combo saves your body. And with the proper equipment, you can cast it correctly. You can set the hooks. You can sink the hooks. That's what I'm working on with that new bait. It's like, okay, now I'm failing in this department. I know what went wrong. Now I've got to change it up, stiffen it here or there to get this big 12-aught beast hook through this much plastic. And so there's, but on a smaller scale, I mean, you can most likely take that Spro and that mag draft and throw it on the same rod. I would probably lean towards the stiffer end. I had watched, I signed up for Bass University a couple weeks, 2 months ago, after appearing on their live with Oliver Nye, Big Bass Dreams.
Cool.
And what was it? Gary Klein does a lot of flipping. And I used to just cringe whenever someone recommended a flipping stick for treble hook baits. It was like, you going to throw crankbaits on a jig rod? It's a little backwards.
Right.
So I was watching this video with Gary Klein, and he's describing the action of his newer flipping sticks, and he's talking like the top 40% of that rod has a pretty good parabolic bend to it. And so that intrigued me, and I forgot the name brand that he uses, but I mean, I guess flipping rods are changing nowadays to become a little more limber. I had a Lew's 711 American Hero flipping stick years ago that was rated 3/4 to 6 ounce, and I absolutely hated throwing even 2 ounces on it because it did not load up at all. That's what really, one, saves your body, and two, helps you cast baits. It's like a slingshot. Like I said, you start back here and you get about halfway through that cast, that rod's fully loaded up, and it's just a follow through after that. It's like casting a fly, except the fly weighs 6 ounces. That's and you point and shoot, load up, follow through, point and shoot. It does. I once fished 14 hours straight for striper with crankdowns. I mean, 7-inch crankbaits that Kevin made from his Chad. It was actually it had a second cut here, and it had a giant, I mean, like 10XD bill on it. And, it was about the beginning of that 14th hour. My wrist started locking up, and I made the last cast, and I had to just armpit lock on the rod and then just reel it in because this hand, it was absolutely useless. So it takes a lot to kill you unless you already have pre-existing conditions.
Right. I was just going to say I went for a striper trip on the Susquehanna Flats one time, and the charter guide that we went with had us throwing some big trying to think what it was. It was a big crankbait, I think, and that was only a 6-hour trip. And by the end of the trip, we went out to dinner after the trip, and I remember sitting at the restaurant going to pick up my drink and just like I felt like my arm was gonna fall off.
And if you do tend to pursue this kind of stuff more and more, if you make enough trips on a weekly, monthly basis, you condition yourself to it. It's no different than going to the gym and working out. You start getting that muscle memory and a little muscle strength, and it just gets easier. I've watched that progression with not only myself but a lot of guys, because I mean, I am really super comfortable throwing 6 and 7-inch baits alongside my conventional stuff all the time. I'm still working on applying and I'm talking 11 and 12-inch baits. They weigh 9 and 11 ounces. I've mainly got those for the stripers. We've had a couple of bad flood years, so I've not been able to pursue them that much until late in the season. And once we do start catching them, I have a 4-year-old son and a wife that works graveyards, so it's hard for myself to get out. And when I do, I throw a 6-inch bait to get a quick bite. And it also helps when I take new people out there. I've got a good friend that's always been busy in his own life. He actually used to fish the FLW tour for a couple of years, but he never got to pursue those striper with me. He went one time by himself and was just completely lost. I went down there. My friend Brennan, who beat me in the July online last year, he caught a 40 from the kayak. And just as he hooked into that, he was about a minute into the fight of that fish. My buddy hooked up to a fish. We were in his nitro. I mean, I was in the back of the boat. I saw Brendan hook up. I turned around. I went to go, hey, Mike, how about we go help him out? And Mike hooked up. And it's like, well, scratch that idea. Never mind. And so I helped him land that in 28 pounds. That was a new personal best for him. And about 15 minutes later, I caught a 14.5 pounder.
Wow.
So it was fun to get on the fish. But that's why I have a lot of the bigger baits. I've thrown them in my bass areas. I don't want to say I've put hundreds of hours with them. I'll put them in areas where I've been bit on 8-inch baits. I'll give it a few casts, 12, 20 casts in that area. And if it don't get a whiff, I'm putting it down. I've only got the northern strain like you in my area. I don't know if you know of the 15-pound Massachusetts fish. That is the unofficial northern strain world record.
Okay.
It was like it was a low 15 and 2, 15.4, something like that. Missouri state record largemouth is at 13.14. So we're already pretty high up there.
Right.
I made a New Year's resolution in 2001 that I was going to break the Missouri state record before I even fished a bunch of this big stuff. There is a smaller body of water, a 30 acre, I guess it'd be a pond, but 30 acres kind of a bigger pond. I had caught an 8-pounder out of there. My brother had an 8.5, and we lost bigger out of it. In 2007, the property around it was bought and then privatized. So I have a body of water near me with giant fish that never seen a swim bait.
Oh man, that's you probably drive by it all the time, right?
I can see it right through the trees in the wintertime. But this has been a blast fishing these swim baits. I mean, it shows you a lot of things with fish positioning. I mean, one time on Table Rock, I was fishing a bluff bank. Had a couple of conventional rods with me, and I want to say it was 2014 because I just had got the newly released S4E83 200, and so I fished this brush pile I came upon. It was on a 45-degree bank. The tip of it may have been in 10 foot of water. Threw a jig through it, nothing. Threw a spinnerbait by it, nothing. Threw jerkbait by it, nothing. Threw that S-Waver 200 by it, and here it come like 5 of these 3-4 pound fish out of this tree come look up at that 8-inch bait. So fish will show themselves, especially with the bigger baits. I don't know if you've seen it with the 168. Smallmouth and spots, at least on Table Rock and Bow Shoals, are notorious followers if they're not in an aggressive feeding mood. I want to say the 2015 season, I probably seen upwards of 300 fish following that bait.
Followers. Wow.
I think at that time Kevin had made a 10.5-inch glide, and I went to throwing that, and I would just wake it on the surface. In between April and it was either April or May, I had 30 topwater strikes on this bait, and 0 hookups. The last straw was an extremely large spotted bass. Its nose never left the water, but its whole body and tail come over the bait, and it had to have been a 21, 22-inch fish.
Wow.
That's a giant spot on tip.
Oh yeah.
And I put it down after that. I'm like, I'm done with this. So another problem I was gonna mention with wake baits. I'll just break this guy out. This is the Fish Lab bluegill wake. The bill isn't as big as on that Strike King. I was having a lot of fish, small fish, they'll headshot these baits. And when they do that on a billed bait, the problem lies in the bill flipping the whole bait out of the way.
Away from the hooks, right.
They completely missed the hooks. That was another bait that I ended up missing a lot of fish on and just put it down. It's not fun when you're missing fish.
Right.
Another new, and you don't have to get giant in these swim baits. This is my go box that I'm playing with here.
Is this the Brian told me to ask you about the $1,500 swim bait box? Is this the go box?
So I had I want to say I got this box from my mom. She found it at like a thrift store or something. I want to say it was like a Barbie doll dress up box. It's plastic. It's gray, silvery, but it's like glitter. Shimmering glitter silver. But it was neat. The center opened up, and then the sides folded out, and there was compartments here. There was compartments in the sides, and then the center area, and it held a lot. I had it on the bed rail of my truck, and I think I shut the door on the truck and rocked it a little bit, and that box fell right on the latch and completely busted the front end of that box out. So now I've got this, I forgot what brand it is. I picked it up from Lowe's. It's like those deep planos, but much larger. I've actually got my truck bone mount sucked to the lid.
Okay.
But there's about that much here. Oh, I do have that other box. Right here. Let's see.
Hang in there, folks. He's almost back.
That is the 11-inch KGB King.
Wow.
There's the 9-inch Legend.
Yeah, it's a bit taller.
And that's the 7-inch check. Kevin won, what was it, 3rd overall in the 18 Big Bass Bash on Lake the Ozarks with a 6-pound fish caught on that bait. I think that was the year, maybe 19. And then the next year, Oliver went and won that same tournament on the ice slide. 232. I'm mixing it up with his 262. 232 is Defiance. And then, I didn't get to fish it this last fall. A bunch of other members of the KGB crew got to, and Cole Anderson took it home, the $100,000 for the KGB legend. Brennan, he was his co-angler, net man. Brennan also won an hour, or second place. No, he won an hour with the legend, and then Kevin himself got a second place in an hour. And then I fished the big bass on Table Rock. We cashed a few more checks. I think 2020, just on KGB Swimbaits, we racked in close to $125,000.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you have the confidence that you can throw that bait and fill out a limit with huge fish, I mean, you're obviously gonna start, pacing the field, and as long as you have the confidence in doing that, I mean, heck, those are the kind of.
That's the 12-inch Savage Gear line through.
Okay.
That's the 10-inch, the new 10-inch pulse tail. It's got the vortex style tail.
Okay.
And then that's a Matt Lures dead twitch and jacked up trout. That's it. You just fish that one slow. Throw it out over a spot. You give it about 5 seconds, you twitch it. Give it about another 5 seconds, you twitch it.
Interesting.
So boot tail versus vortex tail.
Okay. I don't think I've ever seen the vortex tail before.
So the Dream Smashers, they're the same way.
Gotcha.
They wiggle straight back and forth. Whereas those boot tails do that oscillating figure eight.
Okay.
A lot of guys will say use these only in cold, the vortex in cold water. Brennan absolutely slayed on a trout bait called the Head Hunter or Hog Hunter. It looks similar to this. It's a jig hook style bait. It's got the molded in head. Fishing it, he took so much weight out of it, he made it almost a floater, and just fished it slow on a surf or a little medium speed retrieve near the surf.
Okay.
And I watched it on 4th of July. It's freaking 88 degrees outside. And I saw the 7-pounder come 10 feet out from under a dock and nailed this 10-inch bait.
Huh.
And I read it all the time on the forums. I live in Minnesota. I live in Indiana. We're lucky to come across a 5-pounder. Sure, you have a shorter growing season, but once you start throwing these baits, you're going to see a lot more of those 4 and 5 pounders. My average of catching 4+ pound fish went up substantially throwing 6-inch, 2-ounce plus baits. You in a bass's life, their appetites change with their size. When they're little, under say 17 inches, they're frisky. They'll run around. They'll chase them 3-inch shad all day. As they get 20 plus, they'll get a little lazier. They're smarter. They know where bigger prey are. Other than stocked reservoirs like out in Southern California, desert areas where they literally only they may have bluegill. If they're lucky, shad have washed in from whatever river that the lake's fed from. In my area, we have a buffet. We have threadfin shad, gizzard shad, rainbow trout, crappie, bluegill, long-eared sunfish, northern hogsuckers, creek chubs. I mean, it goes on and on for prey items. So they can be constantly, if they get anywhere near hungry, they know where they can go and get a snack. And that snack might be an 8-inch sucker or a 5-inch crappie. They're not going to want to run around and chase them little threadfin shad. It's been a while. I mean, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago I caught like an 18.5-inch fish on a crappie jig. But I don't do it a lot.
Right.
That was wild crappie fishing. Other than that, that's why I still kind of stick with jigs, because there's not really a swim bait for crawdads. Dead Horse Customs, they make giant, like 8-inch crawdads. It's I wouldn't say beaver style, but like if you ever seen the Tackle HD craws, or the Madman craws, it's like a really rough version of that.
Interesting.
I don't know. I really haven't seen a lot of catches on them.
Okay.
I've seen 6, 7, 8, 9-inch long crawdads in my area.
Okay.
Them fish are probably okay with sucking a 4 or 5-inch craw up. That's pretty much what I caught that one other 9 on last year. Was a 3/8 ounce jig with a 4-inch Berkeley fatty craw. So a little larger, but again, larger profile. Whereas other guys might be throwing 3 inches.
Right.
But it all stemmed back to a little kayak tournament. I couldn't upgrade fish worth of the lick, and I went to a bigger size bait. I started catching bigger fish. Most of the times of the year, my best swim bait bites are pre-spawn, post-spawn, and in the fall for the winter feed up. Especially when those bigger gizzard shad do get on the move from like the creeks back out to the main lake when there's deeper water. I followed that pattern on Table Rock in the fall. Once the water temp gets below 60 degrees, I pretty much stick to anywhere near main channel, bluff banks, quick access to deep water. And I've got probably 6 areas that I can go to in the wintertime and throw a glider or floater, and I can catch a limit sitting there.
Wow.
It's just, some can experience instant gratification with these baits. I know a lot of guys have gotten lucky first time, second trip out. They catch a big one or they catch a lot of them. Like decent fish, they catch a bunch of like high 2s, 3s, maybe a handful of 4s and trip on a 6. But to have really regular areas, knowledge, experience, it's going to take a while. I had a year under my belt on that S4E83 200 before I caught my 8-pounder on it on Table Rock. And it's funny. I caught that fish. I retired that bait soon after that, because the tail blew out of it, the actual hard plastic, not the tail section. So the old ones were, if you look at the tail section on that bait, there's an aluminum pin that holds that soft PVC tail in. The old ones were a double toothpick, and so was this 200, and it was right there. Them toothpick holes is where that back half of that bait broke off. I epoxied it one time, and then I lost that piece, and then I just retired the bait and bought a new one. And I've fished the new one in recent years, but ever since I got my 9-inch, this is now the OG Legend. He come out with a newer one that's a smoother profile.
Okay. Oh yeah. You can see the difference there.
But I got this in 17, and this is why I throw more often than the S-Waver 200. I've just gotten really comfortable now. I mean, even after 4 or 5 years, I got comfortable. Now, I mean, we're talking 2 years now, throwing these 9 and 8-inch baits, because they started getting bit, and I stuck with them. And the more you throw them, the more areas, and you got to pay attention to. I mean, there's some factors that play into a bite, whether it be a couple of days after a storm or right there before a storm. Oh my gosh, especially in the fall time, as a storm is rolling in, they put on a feed bag and go in a frenzy. I remember one time on Tabor, I caught like 18 fish in 30 minutes. I mean, as fast as I could get a bait back in there. And in that time, the air temp dropped like 25 degrees. I about lost feeling in the back of my hand, and I left them biting. It's stuff like that. You got certain weather factors, and the jury's still out on some moon phase stuff. Last year I thought it had to be a new moon, but this week we're in a full moon, and I had a fairly good bite this morning. I blew my opportunities, and then I went on to some decent jig fish. My striper pattern, which I won't give out a few details on that, but it took me a year to connect all the dots, and come to find out, due to a lot of factors, these fish were making a false spawn run all season.
Huh.
So I've got a 70-80% success rate on catching a decent fish, if not a giant fish, if not multiple fish. So I can almost plan out my fishing days a month in advance with the wife and go. She's got weekends off, so if that full or new moon falls on the weekend, like the 100 or 0%, I'm like, I want that day, I want this day. Give me a couple hours here and there. Because I mean, last year in March, when I went out that second day to try and cull my bottom fish, I was already sitting in the lead. But second place was like 2 inches behind me, and he had like a 15 or 16 something inch fish to cull. So he could leapfrog me pretty quick. I culled my bottom 3 in 25 minutes. I went out for an hour and then went right back home.
Wow. It must be nice to be able to schedule that. Just like, I'm going to go out. I know I'm going to get them.
But that's the spot I've been working on. This is the 5th year. So the last 4 years, and it was a chatterbait bite that turned me onto it. I went out with a buddy after a hard, heavy rain. He fished some clear water, and I was fishing the dirty water with a black and blue chatterbait, and I threw up on this spot, caught a 512, and it was 20.5 inches, big football. Took some pictures and whatnot. He paddled on in. Made a cast in the same spot, nothing. Adjusted the cast a little bit to the left. It hooked up. It was a 5.2. So in 3 casts, I had 2 over 5. But in that moment, I reflected upon the conditions, what time of year it was. I think that was my old kayak. I still have it. I started fishing at it again. I gave it to my brother, and he gave it back. I don't think I had a graph on it at that time, but in the last couple of years, I started paying attention to the water temp too, which I fished that area more and more. So I've seen it in the springtime when that water starts to climb. As soon as that hits that certain mark, I'm like, yep, gotta go over here, make this cast. It takes some experience. I mean, if you do get into these, don't get discouraged that those first 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 trips out. You're just not. It's not that the fish aren't there. You may not be applying them correctly.
Okay. And as you do it, and as you get followers, and you start seeing, that you're starting to work it the right way or put it in the right place. I mean, that's got to help you, clue you into the fact that you're getting closer to where you need to be, right?
Yeah. In casting angles, especially I like me personally with Table Rock. There's some standing timber left. I mean, the lake's 70 years old now, so a lot of the tops are gone off the trees, but there's still some of the stuff under the water. But it's a lot of rock, a lot of big chunk rock, ledge rock. I fish pretty much, I want to say 12 foot or less.
Okay.
Most of the time we've got typically 10 to 20 foot visibility. So I fish shallow. I fish shallow a lot of the times. And
okay.
what I try to do is I try to parallel these banks, and I try to know my areas, especially if there's like a big boulder here or a big boulder there, or it's a bunch of them strewn out the area. You want to try and create ambush points where a fish, it may be following that, but that fish sees that boulder up ahead, and you're fishing that bait right by that boulder, it can come and pin it. Or like in weed lines, you fish parallel to the weed lines, and the fish may be hanging on those, or they may have their nose stuck out of it. They know they can come around and try and pin that bait. Or that's why I like fishing a lot of floaters. Prey fish, trout, when they're on the surface, they can't go any further up. The surface is as hard as the bottom.
Right.
So fish can eat them on top. Same with dragging a bait on the bottom. They can pit to the bottom.
One of our other guests just recently clued me into that fact that when you think about the surface, it is just like you said, it is another bottom, basically, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because fish can't swim in air.
Right.
They can flip a little bit.
A little bit, but yeah, they definitely have a finite amount of space they can go.
Traction. And I mean, same with docks and seawalls and riprap. All that same. You try to create an ambush point with them. I tend to do a lot of fishing, setting up the kayak in the shallows, casting out deep. Because that's another thing is you're fishing uphill. You're creating that funnel.
Right.
because I saw it on Table Rock at our fall championship. I was throwing a pink spook and one knocker. Those fly really far. I had literally just ripped off the spool dumper the complete opposite direction, and behind me I hear like 6 toilet bowls flushing. I mean, it's a school of bass pushing these 6 and 7 inch gizzard chat up on the bank.
Wow.
And I'm like, like I should have had a power drill, like came back in and whipped it back behind me. I had a 17 3/4 and then whipped it back in. I got the photo of that fish, threw it over, picked up the rod, made another cast. Had an easy 20 plus, but it had one rear hook in it. Gave me a good hook shake, and it straightened the hook out. Night before, this is the second day of that tournament. I had just thrown some chinky, tacky hooks. I picked a pair of trebles up. I'm like, yep, they're damn sharp. Threw them on there. Didn't even think of hooking into a 4 or 5 pound fish that might give me a good head shake at the boat and just straighten the hook out.
Yeah.
Some of these baits come with less than desirable hardware on them. Kevin loads up all his baits with owner ST 41s. They're the 1X strong trebles. They're razor sharp. They'll penetrate bone. As long as you've got your setup right, you shouldn't have any issues straightening them out. Same deal with the Gamakatsu bronze. Yeah. I personally haven't had any issues with them. I like throwing them in the winter when the fish are a little less rowdy. Right now, I'm going 2X strong on everything because the fish are in hyperdrive.
Right.
One of the jig fish I caught today did double backflip. I had it hooked through the nose, so it wasn't going to shake the jig, but it's pretty amazing to see almost 20-inch fish just cartwheeling in the air. So now instead of a 3/8 jig, attach 2, 4, 6 ounces on the end of that hook,
Right.
and you got them good. You might spin that hook out and lose that fish.
Right.
Now, everyone seems to make a good hook, unless it's an absolute just Wish app brand. Nobody makes a terrible hook. I've used Mustad, BMC, Owner, Gamakatsu. Haven't tried Trocar just because no one around really stocks them, and I've not really had any desire to order them offline.
Mm-hmm.
I've always flown with beast hooks because that's what was readily available, and they were easy to get. And those are just beefy hooks for soft plastics.
Right.
With the Gamakatsus, the 2X, either the 2, the 1, the 1/0, the 2/0 size treble hooks, either long or short shank. Sometimes a preference on a long versus short shank. If you got a lot of swipers, or like on a build bait, it's got an oversized bill, you'll want that long shank. If you're around a lot of cover, I like the short shanks. It keeps the hooks tighter up against the body. And then sometimes with the hook positioning, you got the 2 tines where the eye has got the 2 tines facing down.
Right.
2015 Big Bass Bash. We were throwing the first gen Chad, and missing fish left and right. If it was 4 pounds plus, we lost them. And if it was 3 and under, we could land them. For the life of us, we couldn't figure out until the end of the second day. Literally, all we did is because everyone likes to tuck the hooks all night and have that one single treble hanging out. We were missing them because of that. We literally, all we did was we rotated the hooks and we landed the one. I think we ended up winning, landing a 4, but it was like after lines in, like after last cast, and like we pulled our hair out, so we took turns kicking each other in the nuts. I mean, why did you think of that? I don't know. We went home with our tails tucked between our legs. We didn't get nothing. That was our first year fishing that tournament. We come back pretty strong since then.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, to think enough that, well, hey, this is made this way, and if you put it on any other way than the way it sits flush, you're thinking, oh, I put that on wrong. But that's exactly what needed to happen.
Yeah. Because it made them hooks set out a little further on the retrieve instead of always
pinned up
next to the body. So it was getting some of them swipers that weren't really eating the bait good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
interesting. I guess the other one the other cheap swim bait I have, I forget where I even got it. It was like a AliExpress special, and this one actually has a magnet in the stomach that pulls up that hook onto the belly.
That's a Mega Bass Ice Slide 135 knockoff.
Okay.
That's when you fish like a jerk bait.
Okay.
You know, rip. So that's another thing, is playing with your baits, knowing what they do. I occasionally see guys post on the forums a certain bait that may be kind of specialized. They don't know how to use it, and this ain't doing what I thought it was going to do. Flip it. Well, how many times did you take it out? Oh, I made 3 casts with it. You're not going to learn nothing in 3 casts. I said I played with these baits in every time of the year, from 90-degree water temp to high 30s, and so I know what most of these baits will do. Kind of like these Mega Bass Mag Drafts. They are absolute crap in 45-degree water or less. It just the cold makes the soft plastic so hard or firmer.
Right.
It won't swim at a slow pace. You absolutely have to burn it to get it to wiggle the same that it would at a slower speed at a warmer water temperature. My first S-Waver 200, when I swapped the hooks out because it had those big gnarly 3X gaffs on it, it turned into a floater. I think I put 2.5 suspend strips on it, and it was a perfect little. Good. I think it was 1/2 foot a second was where I got it dialed in at, and so I could sit there if I wanted to fish 10 foot of water. I was counting the 20. That's another thing that people don't understand about most glides, that they are a countdown. I had a buddy recently. He got into the glides last fall and asked me, he's like, are these supposed to dive? He's like, whenever I retrieve these, they stay on the surface. I go, are you letting them sink? No. Well, you count it down to the water level you want to fish. Now, like with the super tunes that I was talking about that are floaters that are nose down, again, you got to play with it. Like with crankbaits, it will dive to, just for rough estimate, say 10 foot on 15-pound test, 7.5 on 20, 5 on 25. Different line diameters will make it do different things. You've got to know your baits in and out.
Right.
We had this time in June last year, Kevin released the crappie.
That's a pretty bait.
7-inch. It's like 3 1/4, 3.5 ounce. It has a much taller profile over the Chad, so it's not good at high speed. The Chad, you can about burn the crap out of it. It won't blow out, and you can slow roll. But that crappie, a lot of guys got real excited and they bought them up, and I think I saw one flipped less than a week after the first sale, because it didn't do what they thought it was going to do. It's a slow, what they call a cover glide. Is on. I put little reflective strips.
Okay.
Top of mine, so I can track them, and I can literally walk these through laydowns.
Wow.
It's kind of like fishing a spook, but underwater. And there again, a lot of guys get trapped in. There's that straight retrieve, like with a spook. If you didn't know it, you might know it now. You can jerk real hard one time to get it go to the left, and soft short one. Get the nose turned a little bit to the right, big hard on the left, and you can actually walk that bait one way.
You can drive it. Interesting.
And that's how some guys will fish the wing walls or the trout, the docks. They'll throw it along that dock, and they'll make that bait slam into the floats. Or you can work a glide if you're confident that there's no cables to hang up on under the docks. You can work that glide under that float.
Interesting.
And most of the time, it's all in the reel. You just point the rod at the bait. You don't move the rod. It's all in the reel. 180 reel pops, and you can get that bait to snap with the pops. You can do a fluid turn, but I add a little. It's like a little pump, just a little, and it helps, especially with the slightly bigger baits. It'll get that nose turned for the big wide glides. And if you're wanting to really shoot them out, you do that little pump, and you're giving the rod a little bit. You're throwing the slack back in it, because it
lets it take that wide turn.
Taking slack. And I got so tuned in with that S-Waver 200, I could watch my line hop. It would literally hop like this, right there where it come out of the water. When I knew I was at the right reel speed.
Interesting.
And that's when I got bit the most. Was right there when I was watching that line. And what's fun is whatever direction that line hops, that bait's going the opposite.
Right.
So you kind of, without seeing it, you kind of know where that bait's going. It's little stuff like that you pay attention to. It's been extremely interesting, going on 9 years.
I was going to say, it makes me realize how much I have yet to learn, but it's definitely, hearing you say that, it's definitely something now that I'll think about as I'm retrieving and watching that.
Yeah. And I throw 15-pound big game with the S Waver 168 or the Spro, the 6-inch Spros, or like that Fish Lab gill. I mean, there was a kid in Texas that just landed a 15-pounder on like 6-pound tests. So
Wow.
most of those baits are $20. Unless if you're gonna go broke spending $20, then you don't need to. This ain't the game for you. There's some budget stuff that you can smidge on, but I mean, you can find used. A lot of guys say the Shimano. It's a lower end round reel that you can find on Tackle Warehouse for like $80. It was like Paul Bailey or Matt Newman at iRod. That's all they use. That's all they've used for 20 years. And they've caught some gnarly fish on them. But some guys like the low profile reels. And there's the new Corrado 300. There's the Tranks. There's the Dio Alexa. I think there's a Tatula 300. I'm a Lew's guy. I like my Super Duties. My Super Duty wide spool. My Super Duty 300. Fun fact, the wide spool has the same line capacity as the 300. The 300 just has beefier guts.
Okay. Interesting.
So you can, if you're throwing lighter baits like 4 ounces and under, you can get away with the smaller profile wide spool. But the thing is, they're the same price. They're both $200. I actually bought my Super Duty 300 for $158, brand new, from an outside retailer. But another, so there's plenty of options for reels. There's hardly a bad one. It's just whatever fits in your budget. If you're sticking with, say, 3.5 ounce and under baits, you may be able to get away with a standard 150 size reel. As long, there's a lot of guys. I see it on my Lew's group. I got 63,000 members on my Lew's group, and occasionally I'll see a Roman-made 7-inch negotiator come across, and they throw out, "Oh, I throw this on my Mach 2." I think that's an aluminum framed reel. I can't remember.
Lew's Mach 2, yeah.
But it doesn't quite have the guts of a Super Duty with the bigger brass gears and the pinion support bearing. You're like 14 versus 20 pounds of drag. You can blow through the drag real quick. Swinging on this stuff. But I've seen other guys throw them on the cheaper graphite frame reels. Lew's does have a GX3, Super Duty GX3. It's similar to the 300 speed spool, but it's graphite frame. It doesn't have the external magnetic cast control.
Okay.
And the bearing count, I think it still has the P2 pinion bearing in it. It just doesn't have the 4 extra or so in the handles and stuff. I know guys using it, and so far they're having good success with it, no issue.
Okay.
It's just, you don't buy a Honda Civic to haul your fifth wheel. It's
right. There's
it's
the
really
right tool for the job, right? Yep.
So you want the appropriate.
Right. Like you said, if you're going to get into this, it is a conscious decision. It's not going to be something you probably dabble in very much because you're either in or you're out at that point?
Occasionally, since 2015, I still played with a lot of my conventional stuff because I helped found the Moyak tournament series in 2015. So I fished the first 18 tournaments that we held in the first 2.5 years. It was close to my son's first birthday. Something happened with a sitter or something. I had to miss Bull Shoals tournament. That was the first tournament I'd missed in the 2.5 years since we created the series. But so I held on to still fishing a bunch of conventional stuff. But I know some guys, they've sold off their conventional stuff, and that's strictly all they do. Absolutely throw nothing but swim bait and big swim baits. I mean, if you don't have or want to put in the time to fish tournaments, like, not that you can't catch 5 in a day and have an actually incredible decent bag. Brennan and buddy Joseph won a 5-fish tournament on Table Rock back in August, throwing Chad, and I think they won. I think they won with 4 fish. No, they had 5.
Okay.
Big bass. They had a 6 something pound big bass, and I want to say they had a 4 or 5 pound lead over second place.
Wow.
That's all the bites they got all day. They had I think they had 6 bites, and they landed 5 of
them. That's the way you do it, though. I mean, that's the point of that.
Have time with the baits. They know where to put them. They have spots.
Right.
They have casting angles. They have the equipment. There was a big rush to buy those Chads right after they won that tournament, and then there was an insane demand for those 9-inch legends after they won the Big Bass Bash. So
it's funny how that happens.
Business is booming.
That's awesome.
But keep it simple. There's a lot of guys that go out and buy 20 different things. They'll buy junk off at Amazon, and they might throw it. It might fall apart, or it sinks too fast. It doesn't swim. Spend decent money on good baits, Mega Bass, Spro. You can get in on the working class Zero, or burrito baits, or Dream Smasher, or there's a few custom builders, especially the soft plastic guys. They're the 50 and under category. I say that's without shipping. I paid $25 last year for a pair of 6-inch working class Zero Citizens. Brennan was on a hot bite with them, so I bought myself a set. And first time I threw it in water, I wasn't impressed. It did the same thing for me as the Mag Draft Freestyle, the unrigged did. So I sold them back off. And kind of same deal with this big Dream Smasher Flying V. If I can't manage to land a damn fish on it in the next month and a half, I'm probably going to sell it.
Well, I mean, you have your baits that you know that you have confidence in. So if you're struggling with one, you know.
The C word. Good C word.
The one you're allowed to say, right?
One you're allowed to say. Confidence. There's a lot of guys that will go swinging without confidence, and if you go onto the water with with the mentality that you're already not going to catch anything, you're probably not going to do that way. If you go out with an open mind, with a fresh bait, and observe what's going on throughout the day, throughout the time you fish that bait. And I mean, if it works out, great. You catch some fish, pay attention, write it down, make notes. Like I said, weather conditions, water clarity, what structure, water temp, because that can play into a repetitive pattern. And especially like with, and that carries over from conventional map reading. If you go through a stretch of bank and you've caught 6 fish on this swim bait, you can probably go to a topo map and pick out another spot that's facing the same northern direction or whichever direction, run over there and probably catch fish there too. That might be just a pattern fishing that's really, really common here in the Ozarks. Because if you fish one bank on Table Rock, one certain bank, and you catch a bunch of fish, you can pick out 5 or 6, 7, 8 spots on the map and make a milk run and catch fish off of every single spot.
Right.
The same dang thing, not change color. And so that might be the Ozark pattern fisherman in me. I don't know much of how it is everywhere else. I can kind of say it was like that in California. I fished. I was in Riverside, California, for 4 years, 3.5 years. I fished Paris, Diamond Valley Lake, and Lake Skinner, with Diamond Valley being my main grind. Whenever it was windy, I knew I could throw a buzzbait. In the wintertime, there was this one cove point area. I know I could throw a spoon all the way at the end of it and let it flutter down. And before it hit the bottom, a 4, 5, 6 pound fish would pick it up. It's just throughout the years you fish, you'll pick up on certain patterns. I'm just going to fish for fun this year. I fished a handful of tournaments with the Moayak last year, just enough to get me qualified for the championship. First day of the championship, I threw the 9-inch glide, saw fish, lost a couple of fish. The wind kicked our butt. We actually had like sustained 25-mile-an-hour winds with almost 40-mile-an-hour gusts. There was actually 3 bass boat tournaments that canceled that day.
Oh, wow.
We went out and fished in our little plastic boats. But it was the next day I went out and I actually worked my area backwards. Because in pre-fishing that area, it's a big giant cove. I was going the opposite way than what I fished on tournament day.
Okay.
And, so that second day, I reversed the fishing pattern and first cast caught fish, and made another cast after catching that fish over the piece of timber. Didn't get another bite. Made a third cast, didn't get a bite. Mental note: I had 3 other areas. I mean, right there, I had 3 other pods of trees. I went to the next pod of trees, made a cast into it, caught a fish. Made another cast, nothing. Right there, that confirmed that I could bunny hop these trees.
Every other tree. Yeah.
Back and forth and catch one fish off of it, let it rest, move on. That's what I'm talking about. Paying attention to the little things. Because I could have, I caught 2 fish off this laydown and I pounded it all day and completely ignored the other ones. But I think I had 15 fish throughout the day, and I ended up having biggest one-day limit of the tournament. And it didn't matter. I turned in 1 fish on day 1. I got 2 hourly big basses on that second day, so that was $80 back in my pocket.
Yeah.
But like on these weedless baits, some little details. So I cast 16 or 17. Flashy swimmers have been out for a while. 16, 17, they came out with the flashy swimmer with the gold Colorado blade. And everyone freaked out about it. I'm like, you realize there's a split ring.
So you could have made that yourself. Just bringing in the juice here, guys. Get ready.
So in the 6 years of fishing Moyak, I've not won a live tournament. I've came close a lot of times. My closest margin of loss to first place was a half inch, and that was on Taneycomo. And I had this is before I started laying my net across the deck on the head of the measuring board to catch the floppers.
Yep.
So I had changed out the blade on the splashy swimmer. This is the Advantage spinner baits numbers. I think it's a 3.5 in chartreuse. It's got the metal edged blade.
Okay.
The Kitech 4.8 in IU color. I think that's a 5/0. I was buzzing that over weed beds, and the fish were coming out of them, just exploding on it. So I'd already caught one 18-inch fish. Got a second one. It flopped off the board. But I mean, right as my fingers coming down, take picture. Gone.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I've caught 2. Surely there's more to be caught. I did catch another. I think it was like either 17 3/4, 18 even. And so at the end of the day, that lost 18 would have given me like 2-3 extra inches on my limit.
Yeah, plenty to take it.
But yeah, there's all kinds of little tweaks. You don't have to wait for the manufacturer of whatever hardware. You can do it yourself.
Right. Well, just like you were saying with the weight strips and everything too. I mean, don't be afraid to experiment and make the bait do what you want it to do.
Yeah. See, it's not like the old days with the jerk baits where you had to get in there with a drill and melt lead into the holes to get your jerk baits to suspend, and there's a plethora of hooks to play with to adjust sink rates and strengths and stuff to match your rod and reel combo. And starting out, you keep retrieves simple. Just kind of pay attention to your casting angles, try to create those ambush points. And most of the time, like that S4E83 168, I got bit like 95% of the time on a slow and steady retrieve. I mean, just you kick that reel handle once to get that bait going out to the side, and just enough to where it's meandering
right
forward. And as long as you create that ambush point, you can probably get a fish to eat. Converting followers, I'm not been really good at. Tried the 180s, I've tried the 360s.
Just sudden stop,
Yeah, don't stop because that's the bail.
Okay.
Unless you're already doing the stop, rip, stop, rip, stop, rip. No, if you're doing the slow and steady and you stop, they might come up to it and go, nope, and just bail off. Now, if there's a bunch of them, sometimes you can create a frenzy, because I've got them I can remember one time I saw like 10, 12, 15 fish come over this ledge after the S-Waver 200. And they followed it right up to the bank. One little dink smallmouth come up, bit the tail of that bait, got a little skin hook. I set the hook, missed him. That bait come out, and I swung it around and did an underhand cast. I mean, all in one smooth motion. Bait flying out of the water, swinging around my head, back out, hit the reel, and got it back ahead out on the outside of those fish, and got a 4.5 pound largemouth to eat it.
Wow. Have you had any doubles?
Actually, no.
Okay.
I had a jerkbait double a couple of years ago. It was like an 8-inch fish, but not any real big doubles. So what was that? 2002, when I still had access to that 30-acre pond.
Mm-hmm.
I got into throwing the bigger 3-hook redfin wake bait. I think it's 7 inches. I still have it. The bill broke off of it. I had a double on it. I want to say the one on the back hook was a 9, and because my brother wrestled it between his legs when it broke my line right on the back. But that fish hit and it went down, and as I'm fighting it got weird and heavier, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And I back up, and it comes up, and there's like a 4.5 on a lead hook. It shook off. That's about the only time I've had a real double.
Okay.
Most of the time, those fish want to themselves.
Right.
That's where you get them aggressive fish that absolutely will choke a bait. I've got pictures, baits where this is all you see sticking out of the fish's throat. They've swallowed half that tail on that first bite.
Right.
And you just give me that back. And there's a lot of guys, they go, oh, that trout swim bait, it's so big. No, it's not that big.
Right.
This is like the mouth of a 2.5 pounder. It can eat this whole thing.
Yep.
They will eat 2/3 of their body length. I've caught 15-inch fish on 8-inch baits. I caught a 10-pound walleye years ago. It was 29.5 inches. It had 2 10-inch rainbows in its gut.
Oh my what? Oh, that's crazy.
Inch bait it ate that I was throwing.
Yeah, that's amazing that they can do that.
They are gluttons. They will, when they have the opportunity to eat, they're going to eat until they're absolutely stuffed.
Right.
So don't let the size intimidate you. And this is just the 8-inch Savage Gear. Here's the 6-inch line through compared to the 8. That's another good company. Actually, I had mentioned Savage Gear.
I've taken a look at their stuff. They really go for the lifelike stuff with theirs too. I've seen and just the baits that I've thrown that Savage Gear. So
yeah, that's another decent. They're coming out with a lot of pulse tails. They have a new bluegill jig hook that looks great, and it comes in a weedless model. Tactical Bassins talked about them, and I'm growing fond of them. And they've got I think it's a 7-inch shad I believe it's weedless or top hook line through. Like
Okay.
the and then they have their glides, and I've not thrown their swimmers, I've thrown their glides, and they're fairly decent. But I mean, once I got the Chads, I had no room in my arsenal for the Shine glides.
Right.
But until Kevin makes a 5.5 inch Chad, I may go ahead and get the 5.25 Shine glide just to have a smaller glide. I had got the 6 Sense, I think it's the 140 flow glider, and I was not happy with it.
Okay.
I was pretty disappointed in it. Some guys say you take and shave the joint. You would shave the point,
The shoulders, yeah.
and then it'll swim better. Mine barrel rolled pretty bad.
Okay.
To get it to a good glide. It'll on a straight swim, it looks good, but there was no out.
Big wide turns, yeah.
Because I mean, sometimes they want that smaller, bigger size. A Shad. That's why I have at least the 2 different sizes, a 7 and a 9. But what I've learned over the last couple of years, if you're fishing a spot, you know fish, start small. Like, so last year, I started the first time hitting the spot for the first time of the year. I threw the 6 inch mag draft. I was 2 for 2 for hits, strikes, landing fish. I had like a 17 and a 19. And I was like, okay, the fish are here. Put the 6 down. I picked up the 8. Second, I want to say it was second, third cast, I got that 9.5.
Wow.
I did that on a couple of occasions where I threw just a smaller bait in them just to see if they were there, and if there was fish in the area, active feeding fish, I would bump up the size. But it's just this whole fish behavior and seasons and equipment. It's been fun. I've got there's a lot of guys that try to get one rod to throw at everything.
Right.
Something on my original interview with on the OG show, I asked those guys, how many different rods are there for conventional techniques?
I'd say a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking 6'6" lights for throwing drop shot up to a 7-Eleven extra heavy.
Extra heavy.
And there's 30 something in between.
Right.
Now you want one rod to throw 1 to 6 ounces baits that are treble hook, jig hook, weedless, top water, deep divers. They're looking for the 7-foot medium heavy of the conventional world, and they're really for swimbait.
Right. Interesting.
I have roughly 5-6 rods in my swimbait, in rotation for my swimbaits.
Mm-hmm.
There's the 7-9. It's 3/4 to 3 ounce. There's the TFO 1 to 6, the KGB 2 to 8, the KGB 8 to 14, and then same deal. I went to Bass Pro Catalog store. I see a rod that looked interesting. It was a Abu Garcia Max Toro 7-foot 1 to 4. So I was like, that might be a pretty good like bank feeding stick, thick brush. You don't want that 8-foot rod up in the trees.
Right.
And that's actually the rod I was throwing the 8-inch mag draft with last year and landed that 9 and several other fish with. About $40. But it was a decent rated rod for what I was throwing.
Right.
They can be had for cheap, but you're going to want to spend your money on quality. If you're going to want to like throwing it. Because, like, if you take that catfish rod with that giant red 6600 that weighs 3 freaking pounds, you're not going to like throwing that stuff all day.
Right. Right.
Luz makes a big round reel. It's called a Speed Cast 600. It did all right. I think it has a centrifugal cast control. But other than that, it was a pretty basic reel. My only guff about it was the reel body to the spool. There was almost 1/4 inch gap there, so it was a little awkward making a transition for casting the thumb.
Okay.
But by putting a Super Duty 300, replacing that reel with the Super Duty 300, I dropped 5 or 6 ounces off the combo.
That makes a huge deal. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
That low profile reel. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like a paddle.
Right. We've had that conversation a ton. Yep. Yep. When you're doing something repetitive over and over, 6 ounces is the difference between 50 and 100 pounds, basically. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, we're not Jay Randall fishing for sturgeon. Just we make a 1 or 2, 3 casts every hour and sticking the rod in the holder. You're making a lot of casts every hour, and especially in the heat of the moment when they're eating fast and you're fishing fast. I've got 2 years ago, I caught 10 in 20 casts. I had missed 8 bites. I hadn't had a good weedless bite in a while, so I'd forgotten the particular hook set. I'd been fishing treble baits a lot, and you just let them load up, and then you just kind of gently like lean the rod in and let it load up. Not in the weedless baits. On the beast hook, the hidden hook stuff, tap, and that rod goes 180 real freaking quick. And you hold it there and you grind. There's none of this pumping stuff. You swing that rod for that, just as fast as you could snap. Hook set that, rip that sucker's lips off, and
burn them back. Yep.
You're throwing 20, most of the time you're throwing 20-pound tests. And if you're catching 4, 5, 6 pound fish, they probably don't stand a chance. That 1 9-pound jig fish, same deal. Pegged it, grinded in. I had that fish's mouth filled with water and its body was pinwheeling as it was coming in. I'll admire it when it's in the net. I don't want to admire it as it swims away after it's thrown the hook. But sometimes you got to play them. That Table Rock Big Bass event I fished after the Big Bass Bash, it was funny. Kevin was on a trolling motor, and we were coming by this big old brush pile on the main lake, and he's like, everyone's brothers, uncles, cousins, nephews probably hit that bush and caught that fish off there. And I'd go and I'd toss that 9-inch legend right past it, and here come a 4-pounder out, slam that bait. It was just skin hooked.
Man.
On the side of the jaw. And I'm like trying to play it real nice. With the net. He's got one of them extendable nets, like trying to get it. and just as it come up to it, seen the net and pulled off. There goes a money check.
Heartbreak. Yep.
3-pounders will cash a check. I'm like, crap, there goes the check. Sometimes you gotta play them nice, but if they're eating good, just absolutely hammer
Well on them. Yep.
and reel them in. Unless you visually see that there's an issue with your hook set, they're probably hooked good. Just get them in.
Get them in. Yeah.
Just don't stop. Unless they wrap you around, don't stop. It's been great. I've met a lot of people doing this stuff. Got a lot of great fish throwing these. But it's got to start somewhere.
Right.
I mean, whether it be a $20 Spro, I mean, you got the Rat. This is a Rat 40. I've got 17, 18-inch smallmouth on the 50, the Rat 50 size. Which
I was going to say I have the Rat 50. I forgot about that. So.
Yep. I've got big smallies on that thing. They are not afraid of. But I mean, initial startup with a decent rod and reel, a handful of baits to play with, probably looking $300 or $400.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna want to at least spend 100 to 150 on a rod, 150, 150 on a reel, and then $100 will go quick in 5 or 6 baits. And just fish that stuff and learn it. Some guys like fishing surface baits, and then when that bite goes away, they just go back to conventional stuff, and they fish it till that bite comes back, and then that's all they'll throw. Some guys are big soft plastic guys. Some guys, glides is all they want to throw. You'll find a niche. Unlike conventional stuff that gets torn up, I've seen absolute trashed baits go almost retail. Especially when they're in hype, in fashion. I guess. Because they could be chewed up, paint flaking off, missing an eyeball, crooked hooks, and and still go for damn near retail.
Wow.
So most of the time, if it's not used or abused on the cheaper end of the baits, they can be resold for a decent amount.
Right.
Same with the rod and reel. I mean, if you fish for 4 months and you say, screw this, I'm out, you most likely can get almost nearly all your money back.
Well, that's good to know. But stick with it, learn it.
And it's really rewarding.
Right. But we are at 2 hours and 15 minutes, so we are a little long, but I mean, I feel like we could probably keep doing this for another 2 hours, but for the sake of brevity and so we can have you on again to cover more of this stuff, I think we should probably call it a night on that. But I want to give you an opportunity to shout out your social media. Where can people find you? I know you said YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Is that all under Richy Laughery, or is there?
Oh, I've got my personal Facebook profile. It's Richy R. Laughery. Then I have just a kind of a fan page. I've not really kept up with it too much. Mo Swimbait Slinger. I'm more active with it on Instagram. And then that's my YouTube is Missouri Swimbait Slinger. Just MO Swimbait Slinger.
And how about KGB? Where do people find those? Those
KGBSwimbait.com.
Okay.
Another sponsor is Save Your Outdoors.
Okay.
Never save your stuff.
I was going to say, when you're putting that big money in, you want to make sure that you get it back. So
my swimbait rods have the retrieval devices on them. Every single one. Some of the rod blanks have been too thick, and I've had to sleeve them or make adapters for them, but they're on there.
Okay.
And then gator guards, keel protection, and kayak skeg, the fiberglass patches, and there's a gator patch, and all kinds of fun stuff. And they're gator, I believe it's gator-guards.com.
Okay.
They've got all kinds of fun stuff. And then the Moyak Fishing Series. We just broke a new attendance record today. We had 103 anglers on both shoals today.
Nice.
That's up from the old record of 87 at the championship, actually, last year.
That's awesome. You can definitely tell, our sport's starting to grow leaps and bounds when that kind of stuff happens.
We had guys from Kansas, Colorado, Arkansas, Iowa, Illinois, down fishing both shoals.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully, speaking of that, I wanted to throw in one little plug real quick for our Paddle and Fin Midwest series that we're trying out for the first time this year. The first events are coming up, I think, the second week of April on Dale Hollow. We have the Open and the Clash of Clubs. So if you are interested in that, check it out. So, and I'm still waiting for the PA swing of that, to make it out this way. But the Midwest should be stacked. They have a lot of cool events, so make sure you guys check that out. Richy, again, thanks again, man. Ton of great information. And we will definitely have to have you on again on the new show.
We can cover covers.
Yeah, no, we still have more to cover for sure. So, but it's been awesome. So thank you again. Heck, we could probably even break this down into 2 episodes, but we'll see where we go. But and we'll definitely have you on again. So,
okay.
All right. Everybody, this has been the Bass Fishing for News segment on the Paddle and Fin podcast, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys later.
Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode on Paddle and Fin. Don't forget to go check out our website at paddle_n-fin.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at Paddle and Fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest on a future episode, feel free to email us at paddle_n-fin@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paddle and Fin on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our show supporters, Angler. The Angler button and app just makes for a better time on the water and creates a virtual logbook for every fishing outing out on the water. Shout out to Rocktown Adventures, located in northern Illinois, for all your kayaking, camping, and hiking needs. Shout out to Jig Masters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com